Welcome to our Business Spotlight interview. I really enjoyed speaking to local business owners. I guess my first question really, so you're from Wildflower Turf company outside of Basingstoke. You want to give me a little bit of a background of how the business got started and when about you started and what was your driver for that?
Sure. First of all, thanks very much for having me. That's very kind of you to think of us and looking forward to telling you more. I suppose if you want a bit of history, my father was a first generation farmer and he managed to get going in farming in the 60s, and he was a perfectionist and did it very well. And he got to a point where before the sort of farming buzzword of diversification became a thing, he actually diversified the farming business into a soilless turf business. And he built that for lawns and tees, golf tees, and it's conventional grass turf, but in a very unusual way of growing it. And I came back to the farm and got involved with the farming and loved this process. I thought it had real potential and got stuck in and carried on helping with lawns. But there came a point where the system is intensive and costs quite a lot. And I could see we were being very busy, but not really making much money with it. And I thought, is there anything else we could do to try and improve that? It was probably my father started the business, the lawn stuff in the 80s, early-ish 80s, and I came back from college and stuff, and then thought we'll try some wildflower seed, and that was in about 2004, so quite long. I hate to think how long ago it is now, but to start with, it didn't work, and I didn't quite give up, but I almost did. And then I got a tip from somebody, a technical thing on what might improve it, and tried that, and sure enough, it looked quite good. And I planted, it looked good in that it grew, and anyway, that's how we got going. And the wildflowers generated interest, and there was a general, I think our timing was lucky because there started to be a general interest in biodiversity and wildlife and habitats and things. And our product, and I don't know how much detail you want, but it ticked a lot of boxes at the time, and it just grew very steadily. So the first little bit was just a very small amount of our overall production. I suppose one of the things that happened, my father, as I said, was a perfectionist, and he'd spent his life eradicating arable weeds. And then I came along and said that his pristine system ought to include arable weeds effectively. And he looked at me with horror, but to his credit, he let me experiment. And sure enough, it started to take off.
Wow. Oh, so you showed entrepreneurial spirit right from the off then, and taking those risks going up against your dad in that way, was that a bit risky?
In a way, it wasn't, because we had the benefit of organic growth. It's been really interesting for me to see the alternatives between the sort of organic approach to growth and then a much more sort of structured and in at the deep end approach. Well, it's not an approach to growth, it's where you will set up a business and spend a lot of money to do that. So we had the advantage of doing very small amounts. From his point of view, to start with, he thought it was mad, but then I knew that in order to do it, we had to make enough money through this system. And we had the luxury of being able to really stick a finger in the air and say, what are we going to charge for this? And settled on a figure that was 3 times what he was getting for the lawn turf. And that really only reflected the costs involved. It was the right decision to go for that sort of inflation, if you like. Then he, thinking it was mad, thinking we had no chance of selling anything, but it started to grow. And then he started coming into the office and saying, I'd say we've had a good order of turf. And he'd say, is it wildflower, is it lawn turf? And the smile was broader if it was wildflowers, just because of the sort of margin we could make.
Yeah, fantastic. In your world, what makes you special from your competitors, would you say?
Back in those days, we didn't have any competitors, so we
Oh,
invented the system. Wildflowers were a thing, and conventionally they were established with seed, and that's obviously still a very important way of establishing a habitat. But what we could do with the turf, we invented it. That was it didn't feel like an invention particularly, but it was the first time wildflowers were grown as a turf, and so I suppose that was quite an achievement, really.
you must be so proud of that. You're trailblazing that.
Yes, and yeah, I do think so because there is competition now. Back then, we had about 5 years where we really didn't have any competition, and we learned some pretty hard business lessons with that actually. Because at the time any sale was a good sale, and actually we didn't concentrate hard enough on managing the brand at that point because I didn't really know much about that sort of
No.
time. And as I say, any sale was a good sale. So we did sell it to people who then became our competitors and allowed them to develop their brand on the back of our product. So that was a hard lesson learned, but it was nice to have that grace period. But at the same time, when we started to get competition, I think this was quite interesting. For me, it was, oh my goodness, that's an absolute disaster to start with. But then it quickly became apparent that actually having competition in this area was a really beneficial thing because the competitors started promoting their products. So that was a general increase in promotion of Wildflower Turf. But the other thing is the customers looked at a product that now was being grown in more than one place. So prior to that, there was probably a level of suspicion.
Sorry, I lied.
There was a bit of a level of suspicion as to whether it was a product that had value and was good enough for a customer to buy. But as soon as there was competition, then people thought more people are doing it, so it must be viable and work. So there's an interesting development
Yeah.
in that respect.
Yeah. What's one of the things then that you might have changed or done differently looking back now?
That's a good question, and I have thought about this. On reflection, we should have. I think we didn't do too badly at it. We developed the brand, but to answer your question, I think we could have spent more really developing that brand recognition. It wasn't too bad because we were the only ones doing it for so long. So it did get out there and we got publicity. And there are certain things I think back on, that phrases that are still used today about the description of habitat loss and wildflower loss that are still used, that whilst we didn't necessarily come up with the phrase, we promoted them and they got wide acceptance. So we did all right. But yes, to answer your question, I think we could have recognized the value of brand development more. That would be one thing. There are others, but that probably is one of the bigger ones. Yeah.
I bet you're not alone with that because I think brand awareness is a phrase that is used a lot these days. Whether it was used so much back then, perhaps not. The world was a different place back then.
No, I agree with you. And understanding what a brand is, it's surprising. And bearing in mind, I'm a farmer, so I'm sure lots of other people do understand brand very well. But to me, the brand meant the sort of logo and the way it was depicted. But actually, of course, it means far more than that. It's how you handle the customers, how you have staff. It's a very much bigger thing that's just all about the whole, everything. It encompasses everything, really.
Yes, how people shop, how people research is it's so different today, isn't it? So obviously, yes, you're a farmer at heart as well, and you're in that sector. What would you say for businesses like yourselves that are in that sector, how life is as a business owner right now? We obviously got some changes following government changes, and what does the future look like for you, would you say?
Yeah, that's taking it right to now and a question. And I do think overall for us, our business, I think we're in a good position because it's been widely recognised and accepted that habitat and biodiversity and wildlife are under great threat. And I think the UK is one of the sort of worst countries in Europe for biodiversity loss. And things are being done to redress that. A recent thing is biodiversity net gain, which is now in law as a planning law. And it's really a good thing. I would say that, but it is actually a good thing. There are issues around planning that the government is currently trying to address. And without going into too much detail, I think that is a bit of a threat as well, because putting a law into planning is going to add time and work.
And yeah, cost.
And cost. But the law is a good one. The problem is all those other things and getting them smooth and operating well. But in terms of the law, it is a good one. We should be respecting wildlife. I think most people buy into that. It's just that the process to get there, because of the way we have, I don't know, bureaucracy and politics and things, has made there's a threat there as well as an opportunity. So that's a good thing from our point of view, and just a general wider public acknowledgement of the things I've said. There is a desire to make the environment better.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that's really good and exciting and absolutely the right thing to do. And there are real opportunities to do it in so many places that have been overlooked in the past. So those are all good things. Sorry, I'll just finish that.
No, this is great because you still have that passion and there are opportunities there. And with a law coming in, you can see how that's going to help you.
I think the law is an extra. I think we're lucky to have that. Not many businesses, have that
True.
type of opportunity. But prior to that, we were busy anyway. And the auto light is very eco-minded.
Yes.
Yeah. But so yeah, that's a good thing. What was I saying? But the bigger sort of any business, that's us and the environment we're in. But yeah, I do also worry for SMEs, really. That's what we are. And I think there are a lot of burdens being placed on us at the moment. And there's a lot of difficulties, really, I think. So
Yeah, you're not alone there. There's expectations, isn't there, on businesses like yourselves? How are you reacting to that?
I don't know. I think it's probably easy to get
This is a
suppressed
challenge.
or oppressed by what I think the government has. They've said, I can't remember exactly the rhetoric, but they're saying that we should have broad shoulders and be able to support and still be productive. They want production to get us out of the sort of hole we're in. But I do think they're expecting a lot when they are adding burden to what is already quite a challenging environment. If everything was racing and the economy was absolutely flying, you think our shoulders would be broad enough to take some more of these requirements with tax and bureaucracy burdens and things. But when it isn't, there's only so much you can put up with. There's only so many straws you can keep loading on the back of SMEs before it gets too difficult to function.
I suppose the shoulders aren't quite broad enough because there's somewhat survival mode going on right now for a lot of businesses with these changes, like you say, with minimum wage, with NI, all these, the impact it's having on businesses. You've got to take this into consideration with that. We're starting a new year. Is it going to make a lot of difference for you as a business?
Fortunately, and touch wood furiously, we're going into the new year busy, and I'm excited about that and relieved, and I hope that it won't. But it is going to. We're just lucky to be doing all right, but all the things that they're adding to us is having an impact. And how do you deal with that? Do you put the price up? Do you do all the things that are out in the press, try and cut labour or cut marketing budgets or things like this? Ideally not, and we don't intend to do any of those things.
Yeah.
But as I say, there's only so much you can keep loading before you have to start doing those things. And we're in a relatively lucky position
Yes.
at the moment. But it wasn't, there was spells last year that were tricky. We have the added, I don't know about if it's an added, but we have weather issues. Weather, I'm a farmer,
Of course.
and weather with farming is a major issue, but actually it is with our business. All of our production is outside and our customers need reasonable weather to prepare things to get. So that's another I'm constantly watching the weather forecast and worrying about that. But everybody else has their own pressures, so that might be slightly different. It all adds up. And as I say, at the moment, things are a bit tough.
Do you have any ideas how the government could help further? Have you got any sort of strong feelings on that at all?
I think they've got to stick to their convictions. My one would be, there's talk about the environment, and it's an easy area where you could try as a government, they're talking about planning, aren't they? Planning's a big thing, and that's a good thing for us. Getting planning and getting development done is a good thing for us. Our remit is to try and ensure that all that development is dealt with an environmental mindset, and we have advice and knowledge and products to help do that. So I'm all for it, but we've heard that before from other governments about we must push planning, and it's actually one thing to say it and another thing to really get it over the line. What the question was, advice, wasn't it? Advice, what things would help. Courage of their convictions is that if they, for example, BNG was allowed to, or rescinded or taken out, I think that would be bad news. And the trouble with that, we've seen it in farming, they come up with a policy and that everybody works to that policy and adapts their business to work for the policy. And then if they change their minds, it makes it very hard because you get to a point where everything's just starting to gel and makes sense to everybody, and then they change it. And so that's just so much work that's thrown out
Yeah.
the window. We've seen it with some things that happen with farming, and they're relatively small, some of these other things in the wider business. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I'm thinking back to what you said about the law coming in. When might that be? Any indication?
That's in for BNG.
Oh,
That
it is.
came in last year, so that's
Oh,
running. Uh,
right.
it's good, but it's very early days in it. So it's quite
Yes.
a long way to go before the first applications for planning and with that have BNG implications have all gone through, but the practical bit at the end hasn't necessarily happened yet. So it's got to see a full cycle. It's a commitment for 30 years to ensure that bird biodiversity remains. So it's a big
Mhm.
commitment, and we just need to see a year or two more to just see it really work.
Yeah.
But it's a good thing. It's exciting, and 30-year commitment to this is a good thing. Yeah, we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to what you were saying about the early days of brand awareness, and you, like many businesses, you have an end user, but of course, a lot of your customers aren't necessarily the end user. There's a layer in between that, isn't there? And if businesses are struggling, and you mentioned this, marketing could be one of the first things that's reduced and cut back. And of course, that can really affect your business, can't it? Putting the brakes on something now can really take effect, and has seen many businesses really suffer a couple of months down the line and then have a real shortfall of pipeline.
Yes.
How do you feel about marketing and
I think it's essential, and I think if you're having to cut the budgets there, it's a risky thing to do, because, as you say, it's just all
yeah,
about ensuring that the pipeline's in place. I think it's fairly well documented, and I've been advised that it is the last thing that you really want to be, or at least cutting majorly. No, our intention is to continue and push. And goes back to really what I said about that original, and you've made the point, brand awareness, ensuring
Mhm.
you're out there. And we've got lots to talk about. We have
Yes.
doing a lot of things. We've got the R&D department, so we're really working hard for our customers, really, to ensure that we've got products that are fit for purpose, and we really understand a lot about this. There are quite a few things that we're trying to ensure that we continue with, to just make sure that the customer's getting a good deal and a good product, and that we know what we're talking about, and that we can respond efficiently and with knowledge to any questions and queries.
It's a delightful product that you get to work with, don't you? Now, what gives you your passion? You've been doing this for a while. It's a family business, so you live together, you work together.
Yeah,
What's it like in that respect, running a
you're
family
absolutely
business?
right. And I don't know, people raise their eyebrows about spending all day in the office with my wife and her with me, and then obviously the rest of the time. But no, I must admit, I've enjoyed that. Obviously, there are times when it's a bit fraught and stressful, but she's been fantastic and very much involved with making sure that everything runs smoothly. So it's nice. And I've got a son. Our youngest son has come into the business recently, and so he's really involved, and it's a joy to have him. So the family bit is very
Fantastic.
important.
Yeah, that's great. Little bit of history repeating itself there.
Yeah.
And any top tips then for other family businesses when things get tough? Do we have any non-negotiables between you at all?
Well, we try not to speak about business in the evenings. That's
Yeah.
probably just a thing that is worth trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
that sometimes you can't help, because we have been very busy. Top tips, I'm not sure. I think you'd have to ask them that, perhaps my son as well. But
Yeah.
it's nice, we get on pretty well. He's got to have a bit of his own, able to give him his head and let him come up with ideas, which I was lucky enough with my father. It wasn't always easy with him, for sure, but he was fairly helpful in that respect.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a brilliant story. So, can I ask you where you get your inspiration from then? What inspires you? Are there, I don't know, particular things that you read or listen to? Where do you take your
Oh, yes.
inspiration?
Well, that's a good question. I think I'm keen to that the business progresses. As you said at the start, with an entrepreneurial mindset, I
Yeah.
just love the idea of making sure that it's developing and new things are happening. And I'm always thinking of, that's my thing. I love thinking of ideas. They don't always pass muster, of course, but that's
Yeah.
part of it. So I enjoy that, just keeping an open mind on how you can adapt. You can see from other business, I enjoy going and seeing other businesses. I'm part of one or two sort of farming groups and business groups, and it's amazing what you can pick up by just going to other places and talking to people. So that's an important aspect of it. It's not always easy because you don't always get the time to do these things, but I would say that is a really good source of sort of ideas and inspiration. Yeah, I read a bit. I read a book on management of, it was actually US submarine commander, but it was how he took his submarine from bottom of the fleet to top, and it was basically had so many business links. So that was very good. And
Who
also,
was that by, James? Because that sounds familiar.
it's called Turn the Ship Around. I can't
Yes, I've heard of that. Yeah.
It's a really good one. It's easy read.
Mm.
Lots of little points in that, and that's about building a team. I think as much as anything, it was about building the team. When we started, it was me, my father, and we had one farm foreman. And we're not huge now, but we've got 30 people, and we're operating out of a total of 3 sites. And so having that team mindset and trying to ensure everybody's happy is an important thing. It isn't always easy, for sure, but we work hard. We'll try to ensure that goes on. I think hopefully that sort of answers a bit of that question.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just thinking, if you've grown to a team of 30, can you remember those early days when you were having your first few hires, what it was like?
Yes. Yeah, I suppose that's another area at the moment that's quite difficult. In those early days, it was production hires predominantly, but I suppose it quite quickly. It's always a balancing act. One minute you're doing well on production and you've hoisted that up, and probably the marketing and office side of it's a little bit behind, and sales.
Yeah.
So then you need to build that up, and then once the sales are built up, and then you're running short of production. And it's very much been like that for us. Those early days, yeah, they were great, finding people, employing them, and seeing the productivity increase. They were happy days, I must admit, because we didn't have quite so much pressure, like we were saying earlier. And I was in my element, because it was inventing, if you like. That's a bit of a grand word for what we were doing, but we were coming up with ideas and product development and things, and machinery development. That was all.
Yes. And would you have any offers or promotions as the business? What would you like to share with people? What can people do to really get on board with what you guys are doing there and to follow you and learn more about you if they've found this really interesting?
Yes, I mean, it's the usual stuff. We've got Debbie in marketing looking after our social media and website and things. So our website is wildflowerturf.co.uk, and most of our social media follows that. In terms of what people can do, I think really it's just, I'm a big believer in trying to engage with the environment and green spaces, and just, I think we go across the board from gardens to parks, and most of our sort of things are B2B and generally bigger areas, but gardens are a great place to have wildflowers. And what I always think is that it is time now that we stop. If you think about it in history, particularly with gardens, we've spent up until now really trying to control what's going on, and there is still a place for that, and a lovely lawn is a lovely thing, and borders and things are great, but actually we need to probably give a little bit back and allow things to wild a bit. And you can have a wildflower area, which is very good for pollinators and bees and butterflies and voles and all the things that are needed, and provide that base level of wildlife, if you like. Just even small patches of that can make a big difference. But you do have to allow nature to take control a bit, and you have to accept that it's all cyclical and seasonal. It's very good for understanding seasons and things. And I'm not sure, as a farmer, you really are switched on to all the seasons and the weather. I don't know if everybody is, but it's a useful thing to know about.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it's something that one takes for granted, perhaps, but yeah, it's something that we're very good at the seasons over here, aren't we, in the
Yeah,
UK?
yes.
Particularly with all the amount of new developments going up, that, as you say, to give back to nature in that way.
The way I say it, and we talk about this a bit, but if you can, not everybody can, I understand that, but actually, even if you can support it, so encourage the councils to, and just support, because there's so much opportunity. And if you think about all the green space that you'll find around and about, a lot of it is still mown relentlessly. And there are places where it has to be. You can't have a golf course without mowing
Yeah.
or pitch. So that's absolutely the right thing. But if you think about a lot of the other spaces that aren't frequently used a great deal, verges, roundabouts, even areas within a park, support to develop them into a wildlife friendly sort of habitat would be a great thing that people could do. And every time you do establish a habitat that can sit there year on year, and without going into a proper sales pitch about wildflowers, they really do a lot. They have multifunctional benefits. But if you can support that and provide that, you can consider it a real sort of charitable donation to nature. And nature needs a bit of help.
Yeah, absolutely. It just seems to cover so many bases, really. It's giving something back, helping nature visually. There's cutting maintenance costs of things that don't get done. I can particularly think my old house where I recently moved from, bend in the road, the chevron sign. You can't even see the chevron sign anymore. The verge is just, don't know how often it gets tended, hardly ever by the looks. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's ideal, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, you've my sales pitch for me, Lisa. That's nice.
And I think we all know somewhere that where we live, don't we? It's been fascinating talking with you today. It's great to think that we have a local business here in Hampshire doing what you do, and with the great story, the background of the family business, how you took those entrepreneurial skills and built something. And also, it wasn't overnight. In the farming world, nothing is quick, is it?
No, you're right, actually. And you're in the farming world, your crop is an annual thing. So a lot goes into that. With the turf, we've got a slightly quicker turnaround, but nevertheless, it's not a widget. You can't just ramp it up very
No,
easily. So
go make another one. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It all takes time and planning. But then that is definitely the case with really all businesses. So
Yeah.
we're not exceptional with that.
So if you could have one, if I had a magic wand right now, if there's one thing you could conjure up for the business, what would it be? One thing now, if you could change today,
Um,
Wildflower Turf, what would it be?
If God, this is now you're testing. So a magic wand. So what could we do? I think you've got me on the spot. I know I'm going to think of something at the end of this. It's far more profound, but I suppose it would be nice to have an economic environment that you feel comfortable and
Yeah.
you feel there's real opportunity. And I think I felt that in the past for sure. Probably
Yes.
didn't recognize it in the past. And I think that would be one thing if we could get back to that sort of phase, the magic one would be either to get there or to make sure when we do that I really, first of all, appreciate it, and B, probably do things slightly different to how we've done in the past. It's a really
Mm.
oshy, rubbish answer, but
No, it's a natural answer. So what period are we talking about then?
what
When was that, would you say?
when I suppose there was a time when we were relatively small team and business was flying in terms of product out of the door.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, at that point, I wouldn't mind going back to that and just putting more investment into areas across the business. Just rather than what we did was keep some of that cash within the business for a sort of a rainy day. And actually, that wasn't the wrong thing to do either.
Yeah.
On reflection, it would have been nice to have really invested in building things, and that would include things like marketing, sales, and production, the normal sort of things,
Yes.
but probably put a bigger proportion into that.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. No, it's great to know. Fantastic. It's been wonderful chatting with you today, James. Thank you for your honesty as well on all the different subjects. We've learned a little bit more about you as well.
Thank you very much. That's a pleasure.
Thank you.